Welcome to Conspiracy Theories and Cover-Ups. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode, we're going deep into one of the strangest, most unsettling corners of modern folklore, the mysterious figures known as the Men in Black. Not the Hollywood agents with futuristic weapons, but the real ones. The ones who show up after UFO sightings, the ones who knock without a sound, the ones who leave more questions than answers. Who are they, and why are they watching? Stay tuned. They've been described as pale, expressionless, and almost mechanical in their behavior. Always in pairs, dressed in identical black suits, often arriving in unmarked black cars that seem to materialize from nowhere. The earliest documented cases date back to the late 1940s, just as public fascination with UFOs began to spike in the wake of the Roswell incident. Witnesses who reported seeing strange lights in the sky, or even encountering extraterrestrial beings, often received visits shortly afterward, from men who didn't identify themselves, who showed credentials that vanished under scrutiny, and who spoke in strangely outdated or stilted language. One of the first and most well-known encounters occurred in 1956, when Albert K. Bender, a UFO researcher and founder of the International Flying Saucer Bureau, abruptly shut down his organization. In his later writings, Bender claimed that he had been visited by 3 men in dark suits who warned him to cease his investigations. They didn't threaten him outright. They didn't have to. Their presence alone was enough. He described the meeting as oppressive, surreal, like being hypnotized by something not entirely human. Bender wasn't the only one. In 1967, UFO witness Robert Richardson claimed that after reporting a crash involving a strange metallic object, he was visited by 2 men who asked for the item he had recovered. When he said he had already turned it over to authorities, they told him sternly that if he wanted his wife to remain healthy, he would retrieve it. The visit left Richardson shaken, and the object was never found again. Then there's the case of Dr. Herbert Hopkins in 1976. A physicist and consultant for a Maine-based UFO investigation, Hopkins received a call one night from a man claiming to represent a UFO research organization. Within minutes of the call ending, the man was on his doorstep. Hopkins described him as completely hairless, with waxy skin and bright red lips, as if they were painted on. During the visit, the man gave strange robotic instructions and at one point told Hopkins to destroy all of his UFO research. The figure departed just as suddenly as he had arrived, leaving behind no trace. These cases are just a handful among dozens, possibly hundreds of reports. They all share unnerving similarities. People report UFO encounters, and shortly after, they're silenced by eerie visitors who don't behave like government agents, or even like regular people. They don't seem entirely of this world, and yet their mission is clear: erase, suppress, and intimidate. Whether they're human, extraterrestrial, or something else entirely, the presence of the Men in Black raises one unavoidable question: what are they protecting, and who sent them? The story of the Men in Black is inseparable from the rise of UFO culture in post-war America. The year was 1947, and something strange fell from the sky over Roswell, New Mexico. The military initially reported recovering a flying disc, only to retract the statement hours later, claiming it was nothing more than a weather balloon. But the damage was done. The seed of suspicion had been planted. The public began to look to the skies with fresh eyes, and beneath that growing curiosity, a quiet unease began to take root. In the years that followed, UFO sightings surged across the country. From pilots to police officers, from rural farmers to urban professionals, people from every walk of life began reporting strange lights, unexplained craft, and encounters that defied logic. The government took notice. In 1952, Project Blue Book was launched by the U.S. Air Force, tasked with investigating reports of unidentified flying objects. The project gathered thousands of cases over 2 decades, most of which were labelled explainable: weather phenomena, aircraft, or hoaxes. But a small percentage remained unresolved. As these investigations gained attention, so too did a series of strange visitations. Witnesses and researchers began speaking quietly of intimidating figures who showed up unannounced, asking odd questions and issuing veiled threats. It was during this period in the 1950s and 60s that the Men in Black began to move from rumor into full-blown urban legend. But unlike typical folklore, these stories didn't fade with time. They multiplied, they evolved. It was a time of unprecedented government secrecy. The Cold War was in full swing. Fear of nuclear war gripped the nation. The CIA had begun covert programs like MK Ultra, testing the limits of human consciousness and control, often without public knowledge or consent. The military was experimenting with advanced aircraft in locations like Area 51, a base whose very existence wasn't acknowledged until decades later. Distrust in authority was growing, and not without reason. In that environment, the idea of clandestine agents operating in the shadows didn't feel far-fetched. Americans were already adjusting to a new reality, one where invisible hands shaped public perception, where surveillance expanded behind closed doors, and where unexplained phenomena were often dismissed without explanation. The Men in Black fit right into that landscape. They represented the next logical extension of a government that didn't just want to investigate secrets, it wanted to bury them. Culturally, this era also saw the rise of pulp magazines, B-movies, and science fiction serials, which blurred the line between fantasy and reality. Stories of flying saucers and interstellar visitors became a regular part of the public imagination. But the Men in Black weren't heroic figures. They weren't defenders of Earth like Hollywood would later portray. In these early reports, they were faceless censors, enforcers of silence. They didn't protect people, they scared them into forgetting. Whether real or symbolic, they became the embodiment of a growing belief that behind the curtain of democracy and transparency there existed something colder, something hidden. A force that didn't answer to the people, and that would do anything to protect its secrets. Among the most compelling aspects of the Men in Black phenomenon are the testimonies, first-hand accounts, that follow a chillingly consistent pattern across decades and continents. These aren't simple tales of odd behavior or vague suspicions. They are detailed encounters, reported by individuals who claim to have been followed, threatened or intimidated after witnessing something they were never meant to see. One of the earliest and most thoroughly documented cases is that of Harold Dahl, a harbor patrolman near Puget Sound, Washington. In June 1947, Dahl claimed to have witnessed 6 donut-shaped flying objects hovering above the water. One appeared to malfunction, dropping hot metal slag that killed his dog and injured his son. The following day, Dahl said he was visited by a man in a dark suit who urged him never to speak of the incident again. According to Dahl, the man described the event in such exacting detail that it was clear he already knew everything. He warned Dahl that talking would bring great harm to him and his family. In 1967, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, journalist Mary Heyer began reporting on a wave of strange occurrences in the area, including UFO sightings and encounters with a creature locals dubbed the Mothman. As her investigations intensified, she was visited by a series of unusual men. She described one visitor as having hypnotic eyes and speaking in a flat, mechanical tone. He didn't seem to understand common expressions. Another wore a black suit that appeared too large for his frame and asked oddly specific questions about her work. She reported being deeply disturbed by their presence and began receiving threatening phone calls shortly thereafter. In 1976, Dr. Herbert Hopkins, a physicist consulting on a UFO case in Maine, received a phone call from someone claiming to be part of a research organization. Within minutes, the caller appeared at his door, dressed in a black suit, bald, with extremely pale skin and no eyebrows. Hopkins described the man's behavior as robotic. He was told to destroy his research and warned not to pursue the subject further. As the man left, he walked out into the night and vanished. There was no car, no sound, no indication of where he had gone. There are also photographic accounts, like the infamous 1968 case from Jersey City, where a man named Jack Robinson, a UFO researcher, reported being surveilled. For several days, he and his wife noticed a strange man in a black suit standing across the street from their apartment, watching them. A friend captured a photo of the man, showing him lurking in a doorway, wearing a hat and dark glasses. No one could identify him, and he was never seen again. In each case, the pattern is disturbingly clear. A witness reports an encounter with a UFO or other unexplained phenomenon, and shortly thereafter, they are visited by individuals whose mannerisms and appearance don't align with any conventional explanation. These figures know things they shouldn't. They rarely offer identification. And when they leave behind confusion, fear, and silence. Skeptics of the Men in Black phenomenon are quick to point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And in the case of the Men in Black, the evidence remains largely anecdotal. There are no verified identities, no official documents, and no known organizations that have publicly claimed responsibility for such visits. For many in the scientific and investigative communities, this raises questions about the credibility and consistency of the accounts. Psychologists often suggest that the phenomenon may be rooted in a combination of stress-induced hallucination, memory distortion, and cultural suggestion. Witnesses who report UFO sightings are often under intense emotional strain. The trauma of experiencing something they cannot explain can lead to heightened paranoia, and in some cases, the creation of false memories. Under this theory, the Men in Black are not literal visitors, but manifestations of fear, a psychological response to the feeling of being watched or silenced after a disturbing event. The influence of media is another factor cited by skeptics. The image of the Men in Black as shadowy government agents has been a staple of science fiction since at least the 1950s. Radio dramas, pulp magazines, and later television and film all helped embed this archetype into the public imagination. Once the concept took hold, skeptics argue, it began to shape the narratives of those who experienced unusual phenomena. In other words, people began seeing what they expected to see. Sociologists have also weighed in, suggesting that the Men in Black mythos functions as a kind of modern folklore. Much like tales of vampires or demons in earlier centuries, the Men in Black may serve as a cultural embodiment of distrust, particularly toward institutions of power. In this view, the stories are not about literal men in suits, but rather symbolic expressions of anxiety over government secrecy, surveillance, and manipulation. The detail that these figures often behave oddly or speak in unnatural ways only supports the idea that they are more archetype than agent. Some researchers have attempted to fact-check specific cases, only to find inconsistencies in timelines, a lack of corroborating witnesses, or contradictory retellings of events. In the case of Albert Bender, for example, some believe his original account was exaggerated or fabricated entirely, possibly to boost the profile of his UFO organization. Others argue that the later publication of his book, filled with sensationalist details and vague claims, undermines the credibility of his experience. In more recent years, advancements in surveillance technology, smartphones, and GPS have made it increasingly difficult for such encounters to occur without being captured or verified. Yet the modern Men in Black sightings remain elusive, always just beyond the reach of cameras, always untraceable. To skeptics, this is not proof of their stealth, but rather a sign that the phenomenon persists only because it is unprovable. Still, despite the doubts and the lack of hard evidence, the reports continue, and the deeper question remains, even if the Men in Black are not what they seem, are they still serving the same purpose in our collective imagination? The idea of the Men in Black resonates far beyond the world of UFO sightings. At its core, the phenomenon touches on something much deeper, an unshakable sense that we are not in control of the narratives that shape our lives. In an era defined by institutional secrecy, surveillance, and geopolitical tension, the Men in Black serve as a symbol for a broader fear, that there are forces operating in the shadows, deciding what we're allowed to know. Culturally, the image of the silent, all-knowing figure in the black suit has become iconic. It's not just the uniform, it's what it represents, authority without accountability. The Men in Black don't ask questions, they don't explain. They simply appear, observe, and disappear. In a world increasingly shaped by invisible power structures, algorithms, intelligence agencies, data mining corporations, this archetype feels disturbingly familiar. It embodies the facelessness of modern power. Politically, the theory taps into long-standing suspicions about government transparency. From Watergate to NSA surveillance programs, the public has been reminded time and again that not everything happens in the daylight. The Men in Black theory gives shape to that distrust. It transforms abstract unease into a tangible image, one that can be feared, discussed, and even challenged. Whether or not they exist, the idea of them channels the anxiety of a populace that often feels lied to, misled, or ignored by those in power. Socially, the Men in Black occupy a unique space. They're not just agents of silence, they're gatekeepers of reality. In these stories, they decide what can be spoken of and what must be forgotten. That idea resonates in a time when information is constantly manipulated, where narratives are filtered through media, reshaped by algorithms, and buried under waves of distraction. In this light, the Men in Black are not only suppressors of alien encounters, they are metaphors for every story that gets lost before it's heard. There's also a psychological layer to consider. The Men in Black represent the unknown, not just the cosmic unknown, but the bureaucratic and existential unknowns that confront modern life. We live in a world where the rules often seem written elsewhere, where decisions are made behind closed doors, and where the average person has little access to the mechanisms that guide their future. The Men in Black, then, become a symbol of power that is both omnipresent and unreachable. Their popularity in film and fiction hasn't diluted this impact, it's amplified it. Even in entertainment, they remain enigmatic. Their portrayal may be dramatized, but the central theme remains. There are things we are not supposed to know. The enduring fascination with them isn't simply about aliens or cover-ups, it's about control. Who has it? Who enforces it? And what happens when you see something you're not supposed to see? In that sense, the Men in Black are not just characters in a story. They are a reflection of the age we live in, where information is power, and silence is its most chilling weapon. Among the more speculative and fringe interpretations of the Men in Black phenomenon is the idea that these entities are not agents of the government at all, but something entirely non-human. Some researchers and experiencers have proposed that the Men in Black are not sent to suppress UFO knowledge, but rather manifest as a direct consequence of it. In this view, they are not simply suppressing witnesses, they are part of the phenomenon itself. This theory gains traction from the descriptions of their behavior. Witnesses frequently report that the Men in Black seem unfamiliar with basic human customs, drinking water awkwardly, misusing simple phrases, or not understanding idioms and emotional cues. Some describe them as pale, almost waxen in appearance, with unnatural voices, expressionless faces and a strange stillness, as if mimicking human form without fully understanding it. This has led some to suggest that the Men in Black could be extraterrestrial themselves, a kind of cleanup crew sent to intervene whenever human curiosity gets too close to something not meant to be understood. Others push this theory even further, suggesting that the Men in Black are interdimensional beings. In this model, their purpose isn't necessarily to protect state secrets, but to maintain the integrity of our reality. Think of them as a form of cosmic censorship, beings whose job is to prevent a breakdown between dimensions or to regulate the boundaries of what human consciousness is permitted to access. In this view, UFOs, alien encounters, and even paranormal events are leaks in the veil of perception, and the Men in Black are sent to patch those leaks before they spread. Then there's the theory rooted in ancient folklore, that the Men in Black are not new at all, but part of a much older tradition of watchers, enforcers, or supernatural visitors cloaked in the symbols of authority. Some researchers have drawn parallels between Men in Black encounters and tales of the jinn in Middle Eastern lore, or the fairy folk in Celtic traditions, mysterious beings who appeared uninvited, altered perceptions, and disappeared without a trace. The black suits in this interpretation are simply modern camouflage, an updated uniform for beings that have always been with us, just under different names. Another fringe angle suggests that the Men in Black may be a form of artificial intelligence or bioengineered agents. In these accounts, their robotic speech patterns, lack of facial expressions, and mechanical movements are not evidence of disguise, but of design. They are not human pretending to be something else. They are something else attempting to pass as human, built or programmed for a specific function. Their lack of nuance, empathy, and organic behavior is simply a byproduct of their origin. However far-fetched these theories may sound, they continue to be explored because they offer something that conventional explanations cannot: a framework for the inexplicable. When faced with encounters that defy the laws of physics or logic, these fringe ideas provide a language, however speculative, for understanding what witnesses say they've experienced. Whether extraterrestrial, interdimensional, supernatural, or synthetic, these theories all hinge on a single shared premise. The men in black are not here to protect us. They are here to keep the truth hidden, whatever that truth may be. In recent years, a wave of new accounts and digital age developments has breathed fresh life into the mystery of the men in black. As access to surveillance technology, smartphones, and online forums has expanded, so too has the ability for witnesses to share and sometimes document their encounters in real time. What was once whispered in secrecy now circulates widely, often within hours of being reported. Yet paradoxically, the mystery has only deepened. In 2008, in Niagara Falls, New York, a hotel employee named Shane Sovar reported seeing a triangular UFO hovering near the hotel parking lot. Days later, according to security footage released to a local MUFON, Mutual UFO Network investigator, 2 men in identical black suits entered the building. The footage showed both men to be tall, bald, and eerily similar in appearance. No facial hair, expressionless, and moving in perfect unison. Hotel staff later described them as unsettling, with eyes that seemed larger than normal and behavior that felt rehearsed or unnatural. They asked vague but invasive questions about Sovar's sighting. The footage caused a stir in the UFO community, and to this day, no one has identified the men in the video. Then, in 2016, a Reddit user claimed to have received a visit after posting drone footage of what he believed to be an unidentified aerial object over an abandoned military base. The user, operating under a pseudonym, shared a detailed account of being approached at his apartment by 2 men who produced no identification, yet seemed to know his full name, place of work, and the names of his close relatives. He described them as speaking in flat, emotionless voices and displaying no reaction when asked for credentials. When he refused to delete the footage, they left without another word. Hours later, his YouTube channel was deleted, his Reddit account locked, and the drone itself was reported stolen from his vehicle. While skeptics attributed the story to online fabrication, the sudden disappearance of his content raised questions that were never answered. More recently, several military insiders and former intelligence contractors have hinted at the continued existence of unacknowledged programs tied to advanced aerospace phenomena. Some have even suggested the presence of cleanup teams, specialized units not affiliated with known branches of government, tasked with securing crash sites, confiscating evidence, and managing civilian witnesses. Though these claims are typically veiled in anonymity and plausible deniability, they echo the same themes that have defined Men in Black encounters for decades: secrecy, control, and intimidation. Journalists and researchers attempting to follow up on these cases have often found themselves stonewalled. Interviews fall through, emails go unanswered, leads dry up. In some cases, sources recant their stories without explanation. In others, they disappear from public view entirely. The trail of the Men in Black, even in the age of mass surveillance, remains as elusive as ever. These stories may not be conclusive. They don't offer neat explanations or verifiable proof, but they add a new layer of complexity to a conspiracy that refuses to die. A conspiracy where the unknown isn't just a possibility, it's a constant presence, lingering just outside the reach of the spotlight. Over the course of this episode, we've explored the strange and persistent phenomenon known as the Men in Black, figures who appear in the wake of unexplained encounters, often with an air of authority, but without a traceable identity. We began with the earliest known reports, individuals who spoke of pale men in black suits arriving after UFO sightings, issuing vague threats and vanishing just as quickly as they appeared. From Albert Bender to Dr. Herbert Hopkins, the pattern of behavior has remained unsettlingly consistent. We looked at the historical and political context that gave rise to the theory, a post-war era of heightened secrecy, Cold War paranoia, and growing distrust in governmental transparency. In this atmosphere, the idea of agents operating beyond public oversight didn't feel like fiction. It felt plausible. We examined the claims and testimonies, some documented, others difficult to verify, all telling variations of the same story, encounters with strange individuals who seemed human in form but alien in behavior. They arrived without invitation. They asked questions they shouldn't have known to ask. They seemed unaffected by time, emotion, or even basic human customs. We explored the skeptical perspectives as well, psychological explanations for trauma-induced hallucinations, sociological theories of modern folklore, and cultural arguments about the influence of media in shaping collective fear. Critics remind us that memory is fragile and belief can be contagious. That doesn't mean the stories aren't real, but it does complicate how we interpret them. From there, we expanded into the broader implications. How the men in black have become symbols of hidden authority, expressions of our deepest suspicions about power structures, surveillance, and institutional control. In a world where reality is often filtered and manipulated, the men in black embody the unknown forces that determine what we're allowed to see and what we're made to forget. We also touched on the more speculative interpretations, ideas that stretch the boundaries of accepted thought. That these visitors are not agents of government, but interdimensional gatekeepers. That they are part of the phenomenon itself. That they may be something ancient or artificial, or entirely beyond human classification. Whether those theories are metaphor or something more, they add depth to a mystery that resists a single explanation. And finally, we reviewed the newer stories, digital era accounts that show the men in black haven't vanished. They've simply adapted, moving as they always have, just beyond the margins of what can be proven. In the end, what makes the men in black conspiracy endure isn't evidence, it's the pattern. A pattern of silence, of vanishing details, of people who see too much and then say too little. Whether literal agents or modern mythology, the men in black have become part of our cultural code, reminders that not all truths are welcome and not all knowledge is safe. So the next time you hear a story that's quickly forgotten or witness something that shouldn't be there, you might ask yourself, who decides what we're allowed to remember? Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and this has been another episode of Conspiracy Theories and Cover-Ups. Don't forget to follow and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Share this episode with your fellow conspiracy enthusiasts and be sure to connect with us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and exclusive updates. Join us next time for another exciting journey into the world of conspiracy theories. See you then. If you found this episode fascinating and want to dive even deeper into the world of conspiracy theories, consider subscribing for exclusive access to the material they don't want you to hear. As a subscriber, you'll get banned episodes, episodes deemed too controversial for mainstream platforms, members-only bonus episodes, not available anywhere else, extended director's cut versions of your favourite episodes, early access to new content before it's released to the public, and much more. Thank you for your support. The link is in the description below. Join now.